Good morning, all of you. I welcome all the viewers for day 3 SCRT YouTube official live webinar session, Clep session. Really amazing. So far, we had two webinars by Dr. K.N. Shobha Garu from Anna University. Yeah, today resource persons are with us. Resource person is with us. First of all, I welcome Vettiselvi Madam, IS officer, as well as Poornima Garu, resource person, Pukuri Srinivas Garu to the session. Vettiselvi ma'am, please.
Andariki Namaskaram. Thank you very much. So I could say a lot of teachers connected in YouTube and sending constant messages like good morning. So Andariki Namaskaram. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So మీ అందరికి ట్రైనింగ్ ఇవ్వడానికి ఇక్కడ చాలా ప్రయత్నాలు ప్లానింగ్ చేస్తా ఉన్నాము. సో ఐ కుడ్ సీ లాట్ ఆఫ్ కమెంట్స్ ఒక 3-4 ఇష్యూస్ పైన మీ అందరికి అడ్రస్ చేయాలని ఈ రోజు కనెక్ట్ అయ్యాను. సో ఫస్ట్ థింగ్ ఇస్ ఈ ట్రైనింగ్ ప్రోగ్రామ్ ఇస్ పార్ట్ ఆఫ్ వాట్ వి ఆల్రెడీ ప్లాన్. సో మీకు కావాల్సిన బేసిక్ టీచర్స్ కి సంబంధించిన ట్రైనింగ్ ప్రోగ్రామ్, అసెస్మెంట్ ఎట్లా చేయాలి, టీచర్ క్లాస్ రూమ్ ట్రాన్సాక్షన్ ఎట్లా చేస్తే బాగుంటుంది, అవన్నీ ఈ సెషన్ we're conducting. ఇది కాకుండా we are going to have a spoken English training course soon. ಅದು జరగబోతుంది. Lot of people are asking phonetics. Yes, we are on to the job. ఇవి రెండు ఇప్పుడు తయారు చేస్తున్నాము అండ్ తొందరగా we will telecast that. ఇప్పుడు మీరు వెబినార్ హిట్ అయింది కాబట్టి ఈ స్టైల్లోనే మీకు అవి రెండు కోర్సెస్ కూడా ఇవ్వడం జరుగుతుంది. అండ్ ఆల్సో లాట్ ఆఫ్ టీచర్స్ ఆస్కింగ్ కొత్త సిలబస్ ఎట్లా ట్రాన్స్ఫర్ చేయాలి మాకు నేర్పించండి. ఎస్ వీఆర్ డూయింగ్ దట్ ఆల్సో. సో ఇక్కడికి మీ అందరూ లాక్డౌన్ మీ అందరూ ఇంట్లో ఉంటారు కానీ there are a lot of people who are working behind the screen. మీకు కంటెంట్స్ తయారు చేయడం, మెటీరియల్స్ ప్రిపేర్ చేయడం, కనెక్టివిటీ ఇష్యూస్ అన్ని చేస్తున్నాము. సో ఐ రిక్వెస్ట్ ద టీచర్ కమ్యూనిటీ, మీ ఇంట్రెస్ట్ మాకు అర్థమవుతున్నాయి. ఇన్ఫాక్ట్ ఏపీ టీచర్స్ కమ్యూనిటీ ఇస్ జస్ట్ రాకింగ్. మీ ఇంట్రెస్ట్ ఇంత లెవెల్లో ఉంటుంది, ఇంతమంది పేరు కనెక్ట్ అవుతారు, ఇలా రెస్పాన్స్ ఇస్తారని వీ నెవర్ ఎక్స్పెక్టెడ్ వెన్ వీ స్టార్టెడ్ దిస్ వెబినార్ కోర్స్. థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్. సో వీఆర్ ఆన్ రైట్ ట్రాక్. మీకు ఏం కావాలి, వాట్ ఆర్ యువర్ రిక్వైర్మెంట్స్ అండ్ నీడ్స్ మాకు తెలుసు. And we are also on the job to provide that to you in times of this lockdown. We are on the job and we will do it. That is one issue. Second thing regarding Abhyasa app. So Abhyasa app actually ga mana teachers koso tayar chesina app. So mana teachers 1.5 lakh teachers Andhralo unnaru. So 1.5 lakh teachers ki server capacity entavo anta toti manam starting lo chesam modulu pettamu. So what happened is manam publicize cheyagane lot of parent, lot of public are also started downloading the app. So server capacity hit అయిపోయి ఉన్నాయి. సో దేర్ ఆర్ 2 issues in that. ఒకటి, ఆల్రెడీ ఎవరు వాడుతున్నారో పాత యాప్ ని వాళ్ళందరికీ లాగిన్ ఇష్యూస్ ఇప్పటికి ఉండడం లేదు. వాళ్ళకి కూడా ఏమైనా 60,000 మెంబర్స్ ఆల్రెడీ వాడుతున్న వాళ్ళకి ఇఫ్ దెర్ ఇస్ ఎనీ ఇష్యూ దట్ విల్ బి సార్టెడ్ అవుట్. సో దానికోసం ఒక గూగుల్ ఫామ్ మీ అందరికి ఫ్లోట్ చేసి మీరు లాగిన్ చేయగలరా, లాగిన్ చేయలేదంటే ఏం ప్రాబ్లం మీకు వస్తున్నాయని దాంట్లో టైప్ చేసి మాకు పంపించమన్నాము. సో వీఆర్ వెయిటింగ్ ఫర్ ఆల్ ద 1 lakh టీచర్స్ రెస్పాన్స్ టు కరెక్ట్ ఇట్. నేను 3వ తేదీ రాసాను, నాకు ఇంకా ప్రాబ్లమ్ సాల్వ్ అవ్వలేదు అట్లా చెప్పాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు. వి ఆర్ డూయింగ్ దట్. అండర్ 2-3 days లో దిస్ ఇష్యూస్ ఇస్ సార్టెడ్ అవుట్. టీచర్స్ ఎవరైనా లాగిన్ అవ్వాలంటే వాళ్ళకి వాళ్ళ ట్రెషరీ ఐడి తోటి మ్యాప్ అవ్వాలి. సో దట్ ఈస్ ఆల్సో అనదర్ ప్రాసెస్ విచ్ విల్ డూ అట్ ద బ్యాక్ ఎండ్. సో వాళ్ళకి వాళ్ళ ఏ స్కూల్, టీచర్, మండల్, డిస్ట్రిక్ట్ అవన్నీ డీటెయిల్స్ ఇస్తేనే మేము ఇక్కడ మ్యాప్ చేయగలము. So ఇవి రెండు, this is for our own teachers. If you are a parent community, if anybody can also log in through the guest login. So guest login ఒకటి ఉంది, దానికి లాగిన్ పాస్వర్డ్ ఏమీ అవసరం లేదు. సో మీరు టీచర్ అయినా కూడా మీకు లాగిన్ ఇష్యూస్ కాన్స్టెంట్ గా వస్తా ఉందంటే యూ కెన్ డూ గెస్ట్ లాగిన్. గెస్ట్ లాగిన్ ఎట్లా చేయాలి అని బాగానే ఉన్నాయి కానీ ఐ డోంట్ నో హౌ టు డూ దిస్ గెస్ట్ లాగిన్. అంటే ఈ సెషన్ తర్వాత దేర్ విల్ బి వీడియో ఆన్ హౌ టు డూ దిస్ గెస్ట్ లాగిన్. దానికి సైన్ ఇన్ పాస్వర్డ్ ఏవి అవసరం లేదు. మీ స్టేట్ ని సెలెక్ట్ చేసేసి, మీ లాంగ్వేజ్ సెలెక్ట్ చేసేసి, హూ ఆర్ ఈవెన్ అడుగుతున్న చోట్లో ఎస్ టీచర్, అఫీషియల్ అవన్నిటి కింద అదర్స్ ఉంటుంది. అదర్స్ క్లిక్ చేస్తే యూ కెన్ సీ. అదర్స్ క్లిక్ చేస్తే మీకు కోర్సెస్, లైబ్రరీ, ప్రొఫైల్ ఒక డాష్ బోర్డ్ వస్తే దట్ ఈస్ యువర్ డాష్ బోర్డ్. సో ఇప్పుడు మీరు అనుకున్నట్టు క్లెప్ వీడియో, క్లెప్ 2 వీడియో అట్లా డిస్ప్లే చేయలేదు. బికాస్ వీ హ్యావ్ లాట్ ఆఫ్ ఎంబెడెడ్ కంటెంట్. మా 10th క్లాస్ కంటెంట్ ఉన్నాయి, టీచర్స్ కంటెంట్ ఉన్నాయి, చాలా ఉన్నాయి కాబట్టి అది కోర్సెస్ లో ఉంటుంది. సో మీరు లైబ్రరీకి వెళ్ళి దాంట్లో ఒక చిన్న మ్యాగ్నిఫైయింగ్ గ్లాస్ సింబల్ ఒకటి ఉంటుంది, అది క్లిక్ చేసి క్లబ్ 2 మీరు టైప్ చేస్తే దానికి సంబంధించిన ఏమేమి మేము పోస్ట్ చేసామో అవన్నీ వస్తాయి. సో బేసిక్ 10th క్లాస్ మెటీరియల్ కావాలంటే 10 అండర్ స్కోర్ మీరు టైప్ చేయాలి. ఇంగ్లీష్ మీడియం టైప్ చేయాలి. లేదంటే తమిళ్ టీఎం ఆర్ ఈఎం టైప్ చేయాలి. సో ప్రతి ఒక్క మీ సెర్చెస్ ఆ కీవర్డ్స్ తోటి మీరు మెగ్నిఫైయింగ్ గ్లాస్ సింబల్ క్లిక్ చేసి మీరు సెర్చ్ చేస్తే మీకు కంటెంట్ వచ్చేస్తుంది. వన్స్ కంటెంట్ ఇస్ దేర్, దెన్ యూ కెన్ డైరెక్ట్లీ డౌన్లోడ్ అండ్ సీ ద వీడియోస్ అండ్ ఆన్సర్ ది క్వశ్చన్స్. మీ లాగిన్ పాస్వర్డ్ ఇష్యూ ఉంది అంటే మీరు అదర్స్ లో లాగిన్ అయ్యి ఈ పని చేసుకోవచ్చు. లేదు అదర్స్ లో మీరు లాగిన్ అయితే కూడా నాకు బ్లాంక్ స్క్రీన్ వస్తున్నాయి అలాంటివి వస్తే దట్ ఈస్ అ టెక్నికల్ గ్లిచ్ విచ్ విల్ టేక్ సమ్ టైమ్ టు సాల్వ్ ఇట్. సో దయచేసి ద ఎంటైర్ టీచర్ కమ్యూనిటీ షుడ్ అండర్స్టాండ్ వాట్ ఎగ్జాక్ట్లీ ఈస్ హ్యాపెనింగ్. ఇది ప్రాబ్లం. సో మేము యాప్ తయారు చేసాము, ఆల్మోస్ట్ 1 month యాప్ ని వాడాము. Everything was good. There was not much negative feedback from the teacher community. Around 60,000 members enrolled in it. They used it, they wrote tests, we monitored them, and then we floated and scaled it up for the state. అట్లా చేసేటప్పుడు సో 60,000 1 lakh వరకు కెపాసిటీ బాగానే ఉన్నది. ఎవ్రీబడి స్టార్టెడ్ హిట్టింగ్ ఆన్ ద సర్వర్, వీ హ్యాడ్ అ ప్రాబ్లమ్. సో నౌ లాగిన్ ఇష్యూస్ ఆల్రెడీ గూగుల్ ఫామ్ ఫ్లోట్ చేయడం జరిగింది. లాట్ ఆఫ్ పీపుల్ హావ్ ఎంటర్డ్ ఇట్ ఆల్సో. మీకు గూగుల్ ఫామ్ రాలేదంటే మీ కేఆర్పి ఎస్ఆర్పిని అడగండి, దే విల్ షేర్ ఇట్ అండ్ అక్రాస్ ద గ్రూప్స్. దాంట్లో మీ యాక్చువల్ ప్రాబ్లమ్ ఏమిటి రైట్ చేయండి. సో గివ్ మీ అనదర్ 3-4 days సో దట్ వి విల్ సెటిల్ దిస్ ఇష్యూ. అండ్ సర్వర్ ఇంకా ఒక 10 లక్షల మంది అయినా హిట్ చేస్తారని మేము ఎక్స్పెక్ట్ చేసేసి సర్వర్ కెపాసిటీ కూడా పెంచడం జరుగుతున్నాయి. దిస్ ఇస్ రిగార్డింగ్ ది యాప్. ఎట్లా గెస్ట్ లాగిన్ చేయాలి, లాగిన్ పాస్వర్డ్ చేయకుండానే ఎట్లా మేము కోర్సెస్ ఆఫర్ చేయాలి, ఇప్పుడు ఒక గైడింగ్ వీడియో కూడా పెడతారు. దట్ యూ కెన్ వాచ్ అండ్ యూ కెన్ ట్రై ఇట్ అవుట్. అప్పుడు కూడా ఏమైనా డౌట్ ఉంటే మా నోడల్ ఆఫీసర్ ఉన్నారు, సో శ్రీనివాస్ ఇస్ దేర్, యూ కెన్ కాల్ శ్రీనివాస్ అండ్ ఫైండ్ అవుట్ వాట్ ఇస్ ద ఇష్యూ. అది కాకుండా వేరే ఏ ఇష్యూ ఉందంటే కొంచెం డీటెయిల్ గా మీరు దయచేసి రాయండి. So this is regarding the app. And why are you typing so many comments during the starting of the session is my question. I know you are all very excited, overactive. మీ ఫ్రెండ్స్ ని యూట్యూబ్ లో చూసేసి హాయ్ హలో గుడ్ మార్నింగ్ ఎందుకు పెడుతున్నారు? సో ఇట్ ఈస్ బేసిక్లీ డిస్ట్రాక్టింగ్ ది అదర్ గ్రూప్ ఆల్సో. సో వన్స్ సెషన్ ఇట్స్ ఓకే, ఇప్పుడు నేనే మాట్లాడుతున్నాను. వన్స్ సెషన్ స్టార్టెడ్స్ ఐ వుడ్ రిక్వెస్ట్ ఆల్ ఆఫ్ యూ, మీరు అన్ని కమెంట్స్ వల్ల ప్రాబ్లం ఏదంటే ఐఎమ్ వెరీ గ్లాడ్ దట్ ఆల్ ఆఫ్ యూ ఆర్ హైపర్, ఆల్ ఆఫ్ యూ ఆర్ టైపింగ్ అండ్ టెక్స్టింగ్ గుడ్ మార్నింగ్ టు యువర్ ఫ్రెండ్స్ అండ్ ఆల్ ఇన్ యూట్యూబ్. బట్ ఇక్కడ ప్రాబ్లం ఏదంటే ఏమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఇప్పుడు సంబడి వాంట్స్ టు హ్యావ్ అ క్వశ్చన్ ఇన్ మిడిల్ ఆఫ్ ద సెషన్ అంటే వాళ్ళు టైప్ చేసింది మిస్ అవుతున్నాయి. మీ గుడ్ మార్నింగ్, హాయ్ సార్, హలో సార్, అందులోనే క్వశ్చన్స్ ఆర్ గెటింగ్ డిసపియర్డ్ బికాస్ ఇంతమంది పేరు నౌ రైట్ 26,000 members are connected in YouTube. When all the 26,000 members starts typing hi good morning, మా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఎక్కడ పోతాయి? సో అల్టిమేట్ పర్పస్ ఆఫ్ దిస్ వెబినార్ ఇస్ టు క్లియర్ యువర్ డౌట్స్, మేక్ యు అ పర్ఫెక్ట్ గుడ్ టీచర్. సో దానికోసం ఐ రిక్వెస్ట్ ఆల్ ఆఫ్ యూ, ఈ గుడ్ మార్నింగ్, గుడ్ నైట్, హాయ్ హలో అవన్నీ మీరు 11 o'clock ముందు పెట్టుకోండి, 12 o'clock తర్వాత పెట్టుకోండి. ఇన్ ద మిడిల్ ఆఫ్ ద సెషన్ లెట్ ఓన్లీ ద జెన్యూన్ క్వశ్చన్స్ బీ టైప్డ్ అండ్ పోస్టెడ్ సో దట్ అది వెంటనే మన రిసోర్స్ పర్సన్ ఆన్సర్ చేయడానికి ఇట్ బి వెరీ హెల్ప్ఫుల్. సో దీస్ ఆర్ ద రిక్వెస్ట్ ఫ్రమ్ టు ద టీచర్ కమ్యూనిటీ. సో ఐ విష్ ఐ హ్యావ్ 100% కాన్ఫిడెన్స్ ఇన్ ఆల్ ఆఫ్ యూ. మీ రెస్పాన్స్ అండ్ క్లెప్ వన్ చూస్తే అండ్ ద వెబినార్ కోర్సెస్ చూస్తే ఐఎమ్ 100% కాన్ఫిడెంట్ దట్ యూ విల్ మేక్ ఫుల్ యూజ్ ఆఫ్ ఇట్ అండ్ యూ విల్ డెఫినెట్లీ ఫాలో ద ఇన్స్ట్రక్షన్స్ అనుకుంటాను. సో థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్. టుడే మనకు ఒక కొత్త రిసోర్స్ పర్సన్ వచ్చి ఉన్నారు. సో శోభా మేడం ని మీ అందరికీ క్లబ్ 1 నుంచి తెలుసు. సో టుడే మనకు వచ్చిన రిసోర్స్ పర్సన్ ఇస్ మ్యామ్ ఇస్ ఆన్లైన్, మీకు కనిపిస్తున్నారు. సో డాక్టర్ ఆర్ పూర్ణిమ మ్యామ్. సో షీఈస్ అ డాక్టరేట్, షీ హెస్ డన్ హెస్ రీసెర్చ్ ఇన్ లింగ్విస్టిక్స్, అప్లైడ్ లింగ్విస్టిక్స్, and she is a resource person in British Council. She has done lot of research trainings, teachers trainings. మనకు మన హ్యాండ్ బుక్ ప్రిపరేషన్ కూడా మేడం వచ్చి ఉన్నారు. సో ఐ హోప్ దిస్ సెషన్ విల్ బి వెరీ హెల్ప్ఫుల్. మీ డౌట్స్ అడగండి, మీ ఫీడ్బ్యాక్స్ ఇవ్వండి. వి వాంటెడ్ కన్స్ట్రక్టివ్ ఫీడ్బ్యాక్స్ టు ఇంప్రూవ్ అవర్ సెల్ఫ్స్ అండ్ ఏదైనా ఐ థింక్ యూ విల్ ఫాలో ద ఇన్స్ట్రక్షన్స్ అండ్ మేక్ దిస్ సెషన్ వెరీ హెల్ప్ఫుల్. Over to ma'am and Srinivas, if you want to give an intro for ma'am, please continue. And we will see ma'am will be a recurring resource person who keeps coming for different subjects. So I hope this session will be fruitful and I hope Poornima ma'am will have a good experience with Andhra Pradesh teachers. Thank you all. So much. Good luck.
Yeah, ma'am, continue.
Can we start the session?
Yes, ma'am, you please start.
All right. A very good morning to all of you. It's an extremely happy occasion today to receive such an overwhelming response in the last 2 days. I'm sure all the efforts of the phase 1 of training has paid off. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all those committed teachers of Andhra Pradesh to show so much of eagerness and motivation in times such as these. With that, welcome to day 3 of the Clep session. I'll share my video shortly. Just give me a minute. Right. So welcome to session 3. We have 2 very interesting topics for today. The first session would be on teaching learning materials, preparing them and making the best use of them in our classroom experience. The second session, yes sir, yes sir. Uh, yes, I've started sharing. Let me just check. Now, yes sir, yes. So the first session would be on teaching learning materials. We'll see how we can make the best use of our resources that are available around us. The second session would be on interesting pictures and stories that we can incorporate in our subjects. Why are we doing that, the science behind that, and how to make learning the most effective in our teaching experience are areas that we'll touch upon. But before that, let me remind you what we could really do with our YouTube comment section. It's wonderful, no doubt, to see the thank yous from the good mornings from all the teachers. But I felt, given the current platform where over 20,000 of us are presently united in one particular program, we could make a best use of it, isn't it? So strategies from your classroom. Ultimately, you are the brand ambassador of your classroom. As of now, the comments would be following really very fast. But trust me, you could come back to the same video with the comments right there and you could continue the discussion. Experience was for government school children of standard 11, where I had to teach a poem for them. I spent the entire night making flashcards and charts, and I was very excited for the session. I had received a very crucial constructive criticism that day. It wasn't from my teacher or the head of the department or the subject teacher, but from a student. He came up to me and asked me, why did your flashcard had the word and the meaning, and the chart had a few lines from the poem? All these materials are readily available for us in our textbook. What was the purpose of it? It really got me thinking on why did I spend 8 hours on a tool which was the least effective? I'm sure we all like our flashcards, but today we'll question how can we make them more effective than just fancy instruments that we use in our classroom. So we'll first understand the science behind learning and how we learners respond towards, let's say, charts or videos or flashcards that we prepare. Moving on, now that we understand the science behind it, we'll look at how we can bring theory to practice. Practical suggestions as to how do we plan an effective teaching learning material, where do we fit it in our lesson plans, and how do we see if the learning has happened. Also remember, when you bring in a teaching learning material, the role of a teacher changes. The teacher becomes completely passive, almost like an audience. The learners become the celebrities. They take the center stage. They get to see the teaching learning material. They get to practice, learn, relearn, experiment with it. They also get to fail, and you will watch them succeed in mastering the concept. That is how your teaching learning material has to be. So what is your role in all of this? That's something we'll touch upon. We'll also see the importance of classroom management. Imagine a teaching learning material like an educational laptop or a tablet, and all those little ones excited to have a go with it. It's very important to have some rules of safety and ensure that every child gets an experience out of the teaching learning material. With that being said, I'm sure you're quite excited to move on to the session now. So we'll go with what exactly is the teaching learning material. Remember my flashcards that I made for my teaching practice? It is a teaching material, no doubt, teaching learning material, no doubt. But was it effective? Not really. Let's see why. So firstly, teaching learning materials are educational resources, which means they should carry information that is required for the learner. It has to be supported with an activity-based approach. So it is not important that you bring a flashcard and just show it around to your students, but ensure that it is supported with an activity. It can be a fill in the blanks or match the following, a discussion, a role play, anything of that kind. Secondly, it's an educational aid that promotes experiential learning. Now, I'll quickly draw your attention to the image given on to your left. There is a Lego fractions activity, a math activity. The teacher has collected a few blocks that is otherwise used as a toy with children. She has assigned a few fractions such as half and quarter and one by and a whole, isn't it? So she has converted a toy into an educational aid to promote an experience of learning how to make 2 blocks into a half or how to make 4 blocks into a half, isn't it? So there's an experience that is attached. They are often used by teachers to present meaning and function. We'll use the picture on the left as an example. So not just the meaning of what fractions are, but also the functions, like 2 halves create a whole. Next, they are used by students to practice an experiment. Imagine the class divided into groups with these blocks in their hands. How interesting would it be for them to practice and experiment fractions using these colorful blocks? Also note that the teacher very cleverly has used a particular color for a fraction. So a dark blue is half, a red is 1/4, and a half is yellow. So it's all color coordinated and the color has a specific role to play. So the last point is they're designed and created by the teacher and are readily and also can be readily available. So it's all up to the teacher as to how she makes the best use of resources all around us. With that being said, now you keep your my flashcard on one side and this teaching learning material of the fraction blocks on one side. You will definitely agree with me that the math activity is way more experiential and useful. Why is that so? Why did my flashcard not work? Let us look at the theoretical understanding of why it didn't work out in my classroom session. So this is the theoretical understanding to logically understand why some work and some TLMs just don't work. Edgar Dale was an American educationist. He came up with this visual representation of the cone of experiences. According to him, there are 3 kinds of experiences. One is the symbolic, iconic, and the last one is the direct and purposeful experience. Look at the left-hand side corner. There's an arrow which starts from the least effective to the most effective. Now let us look at the least effective form of experience, which is symbolic experience. A symbolic experience is nothing but a teacher representing a few symbols. In the language of English, alphabet is a symbol that put together form a word. In mathematics, you have addition, subtraction. Likewise, in chemistry, you have their own set of symbols, and I'm sure every subject does. Now, when we are given a lot of symbols, our brain does not process meaning directly. So my flashcard was given to government schools who had minimal exposure to English. So for them, it didn't really matter because there wasn't any experience involved in it. In fact, most of the times you have children who have studied in English medium schools from class standard 1 to 12, but when they come to college, they will not be fluent enough to communicate in English. It's not their fault, really. It's because they've received a lot of symbolic experience in terms of instruction from the teacher and a little bit of iconic instructions, maybe. With that, we'll go to the next form of experience, which is the iconic experience. The iconic experience is not the most effective, but it doesn't mean that it is the least effective as well. It forms the middle ground. I'll tell you why it is effective to a certain extent. That's because there are a few senses that are tapped in, namely the visual representation and the auditory perception. You may play a recording, or maybe they'll be listening to a radio show, maybe, or maybe they'll see a demonstration shown by you. That they're actively focused on what is happening in the classroom, which is also beneficial. In a real world context outside the classroom, these 2 senses are required, maybe in a railway station where you're listening to an announcement. So, which is why these experiences cannot be said that they're not completely experiential. There are a few examples given in the pyramid there. We'll then move on to the direct and purposeful one, purposeful experience, which is by far the most effective way of engaging students in a classroom environment. There are three kinds of experiences that are listed there, isn't it? The first one is the dramatized experience. Dramatized experiences are basically children taking up the roles of anything that comes under the concept. It could be a play in English, or it could also be a solar system where they take up role of each planet and sort of come up with how orbits are around each planet and how they orbit around each other, isn't it? So they take up role and dramatize the concept. The next one is contrived experiences. Contrived experiences are those in which maybe the physical form of that experience or the concept cannot be brought into the classroom. Let's say, for instance, the solar system itself. You could bring a model of the solar system, an electronic model perhaps, which shows the planets revolving around each other. So in such cases, contrived experiences are also important. And the last one, the most weighed down, the most effective, direct, purposeful experience, which is why we have to be very mindful while planning our TLM and not just be focused on how do we just represent a meaning through a flashcard or a chart. Moving on. All right. So on your screen, you can see a whole mapping of teaching learning material available. Let me remind you that this is a brief list. You could add many more to it. Maybe you could just add it all in your chat down there to inform other teachers as well. You'll also notice that most of the resources you would be familiar with. There are also resources that are no longer in use. For instance, the Episcope. So you have to be mindful that you use the most recent and up-to-date form of teaching learning materials. There are broadly three types of teaching learning materials. The first one is projected aids. Projected aids are that which use light to reflect an image or a document. As you can see, a film projector, slides, OHP, all of them use a form of technology to project an image or a movie. The second type is a non-projected aid, something we are all familiar with. Like, for instance, graphic aids would be like maps and posters, comics, flashcards, display boards, something that we can do a lot of activities with using graphic aids. Likewise, you have three-dimensional aids such as models, objects, specimens, and audio aids where you have radio, music system, and speakers, so on and so forth. And lastly, the activity aids, field trips, excursions, exhibitions. Now, you might just be wondering that we have used all of these aids. So what exactly are we gaining out of this session? As much as you have used all these aids, have you really thought about how much of learning has happened? For instance, a field trip to the zoo. What did the child really learn? What can the child learn that he can use outside the classroom context? These are certain areas that we must think of as teachers. Right. Let's look at the criteria and characteristics of teaching learning materials. Now, as we go through this session, use my flashcard as an example of how TLMs shouldn't be, and this fraction activity of an excellent TLM. Firstly, planned with a purpose to achieve learning outcomes. TLMs aren't created randomly for a topic. Look at your learning outcomes. By the end of the session, my student will be able to construct sentences clearly. By the end of the session, my student will be able to calculate fractions. By the end of the session, my students will understand the capitals and the cities of India. So you need to have specific learning outcomes and plan accordingly. Next, provide an opportunity for students to experience cause and effect. Let's say, for example, the math activity. The cause and effect here is the child understands that 2 yellow blocks of half will create a whole. Likewise, 4 green blocks of quarters will create a whole. So there's a cause and effect that is there. Secondly, gives a realistic experience of the real world setting. It is important for the child to know why he's learning a certain concept. Why would a child learn fractions? Maybe the teacher can create a task, asks learners to do a role play of a mother and child, and gives a list, a shopping list. Half kilo of rice, 1 kg of atta, quarter kilo of carrots. So that way they get to experience it and use it outside the classroom experience. Next, it has to be informative, it has to be educative and interesting. Informative in terms of how they can use outside the classroom, educative, an in-depth understanding of how things work and how they don't work. And it has to be interesting, which means it has to be, the next point that follows is it has to be age appropriate and supported with the task. Why a task, you would wonder? If you give a TLM or present a TLM, it is important to check as a teacher if your students have understood the concept or not. A task such as match the following or a discussion is a clear indicator in the classroom to tell you if every child has learned. Where are the areas maybe you require reinforcement, or can you proceed to the next level? So a task plays a very important. And last, it has to be easy to use. It has to be safe, convenient, and convenient to handle. It reminds me again to my teacher training days where the TLM was a sacred tool held very closely by the teacher. She wouldn't distribute to all the 45 children, no matter how curious they were of the tool, simply because they were worried that they might just drop it off or might tear a portion of it or just damage it in some kind. So ensure your TLMs are experiential by the learners as well and not just you. Moving on. I have 3 examples here to showcase excellent ways of representing meaning through TLMs. Let us look at the first image here. But before that, let us have a look at the formula that I've placed on top. TLMs have to be simple, purposeful, and concept-based. The first image on the left is of a respiratory system. Now, the teacher has used a bottle, 2 balloons, a straw, and a piece of a chart. And it looks seemingly easy for the child to practice inhale and exhale, understand concepts of oxygen and carbon dioxide. It is a purpose which has a cause and effect. What happens when you inhale, when the balloons expand, and when you exhale? It is definitely concept-based, as I said, respiratory system. The second example is of a pop-up book. Now, this book, I'm assuming, talks about the variety of fishes that are around perhaps in the ocean. There's an example of a shark. Now, the best way to show the shark here was to show those ridges of teeth there protruding as you open and close the book. It creates an effect, isn't it? You could ask your children to sort of mimic it as well. How would the shark open his jaws, for instance? So it is simple. It has a purpose to show that there are different kinds of fish and mammals available around in the ocean, and it is based on a concept. The last one, the most interesting one and my favorite, is a mathematical they get to create with a few cups. Be it single digit, double digit, or triple digit numbers, they get to do mathematical operations such as addition, subtraction, division. Now, all 3 activities have one thing in common. You're celebrating your learner. You're giving an opportunity for the learner to succeed in the classroom. Imagine how happy the child would be to see if he's successful in getting the inhale, exhale operation done, to see the jaws moving of the shark, and especially to get the mathematical operation right. You're celebrating his success story there. The ultimate aim of every teacher is to ensure that the child falls in love with the subject, falls in love with the process of learning. And these are fundamental ways that you ensure that happens. Give them the platform to succeed. Next. Planning a TLM in a lesson. Now, as much as success is very important, it is also important that they are allowed to fail, not really get the solutions right in the first time. Because that amount of struggle is also crucial for learning. And I'm not just telling it for the sake of feel good about the whole teaching experience, but it is scientific. The more the brain struggles, the more the power it uses to solve problems. Problem solving is a key skill. So tools such as the shark or the paper cup, even if they don't get the answers right, they don't feel bad about it. Instead, they are intrinsically motivated to try again. So give an opportunity to try and fail and relearn and succeed at the end of it. So let us quickly go through the 3 steps. Now that you know the science of TLM, what makes an effective TLM, how do you incorporate it on a day-to-day basis. Now remember, you don't have to choose one TLM. Use a group of TLMs. To ensure that my flashcard was strong and successful, what I could have done was accommodate other teacher learning materials as well. Maybe a video along with it, maybe a role play along with it. So in order to make it effective, ensure that you combine a lot more other materials as well. So what do you do first? You must be aware of the topics that you cover according to each period by now. Based on each period, come up with really strong objectives. And these objectives have to be focused on skills that they acquire, be it calculation, be it communication, depending on your subject. So focus on your learning outcomes depending on the skill that you want to focus on. Next, once that you know our learning outcomes, be very careful in choosing a core activity to ensure that learning outcomes are met. The core concept is your theme, and that is the theme through which you plan an activity. Now, this activity has to be supported with a TLM. Now, you have a list already that was provided. You could always Google, and not just Google, but research so many other teaching communities online to find the best suitable TLM. Now, how do we know it is the best? But before that, we look at how do we create one. We'll keep the glass activity that I just showed, the paper cups to come up with addition and subtraction. We'll keep that as an example. Focus on the SMART acronym. S stands for specific. Be very specific what the TLM is going to achieve. For instance, it is going to achieve an addition of single-digit numbers, subtraction of double-digit numbers. And the next one is it has to be measurable. Measurable in terms of how would you know that learning is achieved? How do you know that the concept is understood? For that, it has to be supported with a task. So ensure that when I see a child doing the mathematical operation based on the sums that I've given, I can measure how much of it he has learned and how much time he's taking to solve the equations, and maybe he requires something more complex. Next is it's achievable. Ensure your TLM and the task are not too easy, at the same time not too difficult. Ensure there's a little bit of struggle where they get to experiment and practice a bit. It has to be realistic. Realistic in terms of how they can use it outside the classroom. Maybe you could come up, your task could be a subsection of making it more realistic to them. And lastly, time bound. All the three activities shown in the previous slide do not take a lot of time to set up in the classroom. It takes the least amount of time, and ensure that you maintain the pace. The pace is very important when you set up an activity, because that's where you catch hold of the motivation and interest in learners. And the last being the procedure. Once you've identified the TLM, the task, and the learning outcomes, I'm doing it in the other way around, the learning outcomes, the activity, and the TLM, focus on where do you want to fix it. Now, I'm sure with your lesson plans, you have a clear-cut understanding on the different stages. You could use a TLM right in the beginning of the session. You could use it in the middle, or you could even use it in the end towards a recapitulation. It's up to you. Also remember that the TLM that you once create can be used later on for a recap, probably after 4 to 5 weeks in the initial stages, quick recap, because they've already practiced it earlier. Next. This is the blueprint that I had suggested in the previous slide, right here. Once you have the learning stages, you'll have to come up with a blueprint. A solid blueprint will know the strengths and the weaknesses of your TLM. So for example, I had created an activity through flashcards. And let's look at the blueprint now. The first column is what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be doing a practice session on tenses, exclusively past tense. What I'm going to do with the flashcards is the whole class is divided into groups. Each groups get a set of cards with vocabulary as well. And with it, I give them a dictionary. As a group, they have to come up with a story. If they struggle with the vocabulary, they can use the dictionary to get the meaning. Now, why am I using the flashcards with the words and all of that? Let's just look here on the TLM to promote storytelling narrative skills using past tense. Many teachers of English, when they use tenses, kind of forget as to why exactly are they learning tenses. It is important for the child to know that most often in any language, a past tense is usually used when you narrate a story or an incident or something that happened in the past. So past tense is very important when you recall such situations. You could ask your students, where exactly do you use where would such occasions arise? It could be with friends, family, or maybe even in an interview, isn't it? All right. So, firstly, to promote storytelling narrative skills. Secondly, reference skills using a dictionary. As much as you can give an input in language learning in the classroom, equip your learner to learn the language outside the classroom when you are not around them. Reference skills using dictionary is a crucial skill that you sort of at the beginning. So encourage them to refer to at least one word. Out of the 4 words and vocabulary that I've given, maybe one of it would be new to them. Let them refer, let them find out the meaning of it, and try to fit into the story. To introduce new vocabulary I've listed, and following it is to encourage creative expression. Remember, the story cards have different images. They have to come up with a storyline with it and talk about it in past tense. Now, when do I fix this? I think I'd fix it in the stage of recapitulation. Once I've taught them tenses, once I've done a few activities, towards the end, probably I'll come up with a recapitulation. How am I going to engage my students? It's a student-led activity, and I'll be forming them into different groups. Now, how? Now, how is very important because you have to fix the time for it. Now, considering I've given 10 minutes to it, I have to ensure my activities aren't too many before the recapitulation. I don't want to tire them out of the topic. This activity towards the end would be the right way of executing only because it will get them all excited because they are participating for the most part of it. So the time is very important, and ensure there's a feedback always that is supported towards the end. Right. Now that you have a blueprint sorted and everything, you have your teaching learning material and all your learning outcomes in your head and you're ready to go into the classroom. How do you roll it out? It is important to ensure when it comes to your TLM exclusively to give clear, simple instructions. Firstly, tell them words, or you are given 2 minutes to find the meaning of the first word. First comes the time. Secondly, inform them how are they going to work. Are they going to work individually or in pairs or in groups? Thirdly, if there is a demo that is required with the TLM, such as the math fraction cups, give them a demo. Even a fraction activity, give them a demo. A demo is crucial for learners who might not get the instructions clearly. So it's ensured that you give them a demo. Next, plan and fix classroom rules to use and interact. It is a social skill that you have to inculcate in your children, no matter what subject you handle. Teach them and model to them what it is to be respectful to each other, share ideas, question each other, and ask for support from each other. Next, identify student leaders for ensuring that the rules are followed. The rules have to be made because you have to create a safe environment. Creating student leaders to collect the teaching learning materials and give it to you, ensure that nobody drops them, ensure everybody uses it, gives them a certain level of accountability and responsibility as well. Make them the partners of teaching, make them your partner in the process. That's the best way to ensure that the learning happens. Next, role of the teacher. Now that you've given your teaching learning materials, everything is going on track, the leaders are all around the classroom ensuring things are happening. What do you do? Like I said in the beginning of the session, you need to model the TLM and then facilitate the session. After which, you have to monitor how students interact and support each other. This will help you to group them for the next activity. Identify students who might need more support and opportunities. Build rapport through praise and acknowledgement and give them feedback. That is most important. Wrapping up the activity and providing the feedback. Now that the activity is completed and you get your resources back from the student leaders, what do? Encourage groups to come up with questions to ask each other. How did you work out such and such? And how was your experience in this? Maybe they could just come up with a question bank of maybe 3 questions from the concept. Ensure that there's a question answer session after the TLM activity. Check for understanding through your own concept check questions. Next, appreciate student effort. Nominate active participants. Nominating active participants will have its benefits for your next session of your TLM. Highlight on what went well in the activity and areas that can be improved. Remember, I told you that you could use the same TLM maybe after a few weeks for a recapitulation. So when they get it the second time around, they'll be reminded on what went well the first time and ensure that it is replicated again. Now, these were the learning outcomes for the first half of the session. We gained a basic theoretical understanding on the role and purpose of TLM. We also found out a few practical strategies of incorporating TLM and also our roles of a teacher, what does she do in the classroom, and how to manage the classroom environment. Now, I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions as to how to go about this. But remember one thing that is very important. If you have given a mango seed, you plant it. You don't go on the same day to go fetching your mangoes. You wait for the results to come. It's not quite easy to fix in a blueprint or come up with learning outcomes in the first go. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of experiments and it takes a lot of learning about your learner, what makes them happy and what really makes them engaged. So keep the practice going and ensure that you're learning constantly about your learner and your subject matter. As of now, we'll proceed with the next session. Keep your questions going because we'll collect all of it towards the end and I'll be very happy to clarify them. The second session is related to teaching learning materials. It's pictures and stories. Let us check this current status as of now. Do we have pictures and stories in our materials, that is our course books? Are pictures and stories related to the content? Are pictures and stories age appropriate? Have you used pictures and stories while teaching? I'm guessing that most of us would say a yes for at least 3 questions. And in fact, most of you all would say yes for all the 4. But have you ever thought about how do children respond to certain pictures? How does learning happen through that pictures? How are they able to describe a particular aspect easily? How are they able to do a mathematical operation more easily, or a story that you've shared in the classroom? Let us look at the theoretical understanding, the science behind it. There are 2 theories that are pinned here. There are ample theories out there that support stories and pictures, and I've chosen 2. I've very briefly put it up here on this slide. The first theory being the dual code theory, which was propounded by Alan Pavio. He basically said that there must be 2 ways of representing meaning. Any verbal communication, anything that involves language, should be supported with a picture. So there are 2 ways of representing meaning. These 2 representations of meaning provide a solid foundation of understanding and processing information for the learner. So it is very important that you don't just add pictures, but add meaningful pictures. The pictures should communicate the concept. They shouldn't be filling up the space just for the purpose of decoration. Remember the flashcard that I used? It was just purely for decoration and plan. So ensure it is meaningful, integrated with the lesson 100%. The second theory is a theory of connectionism, which was proposed by Edward Thorndike. He spoke about the results of associations that between responses. Now, stimuli is pretty much the teaching learning materials that you to which it is how you now the more it is strengthened based on the concepts retained in the brain produced by the learner. Ensure that it is not the operation of the cups, that they can get from so forth. So these are the two theories. Now I'll give you all an example because it might just be a yeah, I think I got disconnected. Yes. Right. I'm sorry for that small glitch. Yes. So how can pictures and stories be presented in the plan? Now, stories and pictures can be incorporated in any of the teaching learning material that you see on the screen. You could use 2 to 3 of these teaching learning materials to communicate all of it. Yes. Oh, okay. 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 If in case you found me a bit fast previously, do not worry because it's recorded and you could come back to look at the video. But going forward, I'll try to be a bit more slow to ensure that you get an understanding. Right. So the previous slide, I'll go back to this one. How can we make pictures and stories effective? Keeping in mind those theories. Now you could choose any of these teaching learning materials for your session. You could club 2 to 3 of them together if you want. Next. These are the suggested ways of interaction. Now, bear in mind classroom management is very important. So try to understand if these pictures can be easily communicated individually one-on-one or through partner work, such as a pair share activity, or in small groups or in whole class engagements. On the left, you would find a few examples. Now, these are examples that I happen to explore through the internet. The internet has a lot of resources on how to come up with activities. You could choose any of it to ensure that you pass on the pictures and the stories that you have accommodated. Now, let me give you an example. Firstly, we look at the criteria for the pictures and stories, the aim. Pictures and stories, like any other TLM, have to align with the learning outcome. They should have a purpose that is supported with a task. There are a few examples that I have given: matching exercise, fill-ups, small group discussion, and role play. Utility is also important. Utility meaning the usage. How useful is the picture? How useful will the story be? Now that you know the theories and the criteria, let's look at a blueprint of my TLM. This time I've chosen mathematics. Let me move this aside. Yes. I've chosen fractions again, but with a different activity. So the students have to create a storyline. So what are they going to do? Now I'm going to be showing a video of 2 children making a pizza together. Now this is focused for children who have never eaten a pizza and have no idea what it is. So they get to see the meaning of what exactly it is. It is a dish. Students become aware of the basic ingredients, shape, size, etc. about the dish. Students are informed that they get to throw a party for their friends and create their own pizzas. Now, teacher models a recipe using fractions on the board. She comes up with sample recipes with the ingredients, like half a cup of cheese, 1 cup of flour. So basically the fractions are included in terms of ingredients. Once created, the pizzas are exchanged with each other. The children get to assess each other's work. They get to assess if the recipe was followed. Now, why and what makes it strong, my TLM makes it strong, is because it creates interest in learners. Believe me, even if they do not know what a pizza is, they get really interested in comparison to a dish like an idli or a dosa. So experiment with your content as well. To introduce fraction using a context. Where do fractions often used? Usually in recipes, isn't it? So there is a strong context. To adapt the concept, fractions have to be in a real world setting. Maybe a task of get a recipe from your grandmother using fractions on your favorite dish. So you could give a task like that as a homework as well. To collaborate and support each other, to share the recipe in English. Now, including English is a key strategy here because you're giving them vocabulary in terms of ingredients. You do not have to be very ambitious here that they have to speak fluently in sentences. Even if you're willing to share a few sentences in English to express their opinions on the pizza party and the pizza that they enjoyed, that is a success. Next, the stage that I plan to use this activity. I'm sorry, I've come to the next slide. I'd use it in stage 1, right in the beginning, or probably in the end. It's up to me. Student work in pairs, and these pairs are accommodated into small groups. So 4 groups with 6 members. So each table you get 2 to 3 pizzas, and they get to be exchanged with other groups. Now, how am I going to be doing it? I'll be introducing the concept, I'll be modeling the TLM, give them the opportunity to practice and provide feedback. I have not mentioned the timestamps here because it varies from one learner to another and how much time you would want to give in your classroom session. But ensure you give a timestamp here as well. Now let's look at the activity itself. Remember I told you the video that I'd share with them? It is a teaching learning material that I have sourced and I'll be sharing it with them. Another TLM that I've introduced in the activity is a recipe that is created by me. These recipes have the following ingredients. Now you could give them flashcards, or you could also bring the realia of these ingredients. Bring them to the classroom, black olives, mushrooms, or whatever it is. Show them what exactly it is. And then the recipe sheet. Look at the fractions that are mentioned here and the drawing right here. Each student gets a recipe and comes up with a pizza. The final result would be something like this, where the child can share it with the fellow students. So there's an experience that is involved. The fellow student who receives the pizza gets to talk about it, telling my pizza had half a sausage, quarter cup of black olives, and quarter cup of pepperoni, and it tasted delicious. They could go on describing it as well as to what was the color and what was the taste, and give them the opportunity to imagine it. I'm sure you'd get a lot of interesting responses that way. Next comes the criteria of choosing pictures and stories. Like I said, keep this activity, the pizza activity, in mind. 8, the pictures and stories align with the learning outcome of fractions. It has a purpose, that is a task plan of creating a recipe. Utility, the theme of fraction is integrated with the topic of images of the ingredients are purely informative purposes and are not decorative. Remember the theory that we pointed out right in the beginning, that there are 2 ways of understanding. Now, pizzas, the concept of pizzas were introduced through a video and also a story that they come up towards the end, and also through flashcards of the ingredients. Secondly, the theory of connectionism is a result of association. So the next time they have anything to do with fractions, they'll get reminded of this activity. So these activities, yes, sir? Yes, I'm almost through. So these experiences create a strong bond in learning. So these were the learning outcomes that we had planned earlier for the second session. I'm sure you would have gained a theoretical understanding of how pictures and stories improve learning experiences. And you've received a practical strategy based on the first session through the blueprint and how you execute. And lastly, identifying interaction patterns through group work or pair work or individual engagements. With this, I conclude this session. Maybe you could now come up with your questions. I'll be most happy to clarify in it.
Questions, ma'am? Yeah, there are a few questions. Abigail, ma'am? Madam, you can stop sharing your screen. Poornima, Dr. Poornima, please stop sharing your
I'm
screen.
not able to hear you, sir.
Oh, Dr. Poornima, stop sharing your
Yes,
screen.
yes, sir.
Yeah, we have some KRP from state, Andhra Pradesh. Abigail, ma'am, you please ask your doubt.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
yes, you are
Can you
audible.
hear?
You are audible. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning. Now, as we are dealing with the TLM and also the trigger of pictures and also this stories for our teaching learning material. Now, as we are dealing with activity-based method, so far I think we have gone through a lot of information in detailed way. And now I would like to, ma'am, can you give one example related to EBS, how we can involve and with the base of interaction mode, can you suggest one activity or the simple just for if we take one planting or the life of this leaf or also photosynthesis? Can you give one example how we can involve the student with this TLM?
Thank you so much, Ms. Abigail. It's lovely to see you
Yeah,
again. The
yeah.
question is,
Thank you, ma'am.
you have raised a very
Yeah.
interesting question here, and you've supported it with the examples. Let's just look at water cycle.
Yes, ma'am.
For instance, maybe you could,
Yeah.
an activity that comes immediately in my mind is taking a plastic bag and making a figure of the water cycle on it and filling it in water. When you place it on the window, you can see that the water precipitates on top and it comes back and gets collected in the bag itself. There are a number of activities of planting and soil germination, so on and so forth, that are already there that we have used in our classrooms. What we need to do now is come up with stronger tasks with that. Ask them to describe it more. Question them, why did it happen this way? Why did it not happen that way? So there are, like Shobha ma'am did say, that these webinars essentially begin the discussion of exploring ideas. We can't stop it right here. We need to explore further. These are two examples that just came quickly off my head. I'm sure there are better ways of doing it as well, and I'm not done full justice to it. But please do explore teacher platforms that are available on the internet. You'll find a lot more interesting ideas.
Yeah, thank you very
So
much,
much,
ma'am.
ma'am. Because yes, we have to involve the student for the better enrichment of the learning. So as a part of that, just I would like to make it clear for the sake of our teachers, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
The most
Yeah, madam, Yagna all in one. She posted one question. Techniques to develop TLM. Who handle classes since they don't have much time for that? Is there any technique?
I think the biggest technique is your solid planning. If you have a purpose for a recapitulation, how much time are you going to give for your recapitulation? Is it 5 minutes? So get a TLM that supports only that 5 minutes. Like that cup activity in mathematics, I give them just one problem. It should hardly take 3 minutes for them to do a single digit addition or a double digit multiplication. So the time is up to you as to how you allocate for each stage.
Yeah, thank you very much, madam. Nagendra Babu, this is for SCRT. Very useful topic. Thanks to SCRT, we are doing our job. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening, viewing us. And another question, Abdul Khader from Kurnool district. He has three questions. Out of three, first question is types TLMs. Which one is more effective? First question.
So I'm not able to hear your voice clearly.
Yeah. Is it right now? Is it okay? Are you audible? Hello?
Yes, sir. Or maybe you could just put it in the chat on our right side so I can see the question if that's fine.
Yes, sir. You may hear, madam. Abdul Khader from Kurnool.
Mm-hmm.
He's asking that out of three types, three types of TLM, which one is more effective?
Honestly, all three types are effective. How effective it is depending on the task that you assign. Like, for example, the flashcard is a TLM. but it gets to be effective only with the task that I have planned.
Oh,
So
nice.
you cannot say that certain are effective and some aren't effective.
Yeah, another question from same Abdul Khader. He has three questions. The second one is, can we use TLM for class 11 and 12th standard students?
Oh, definitely. Flashcards are not exclusively for primary learners. They can be used for class 11 and 12. Make it more complicated with, again, as I stress, as much as I can on the task. Yes.
The third question, can the symbolic experiences helpful in acquiring language?
Of course, symbolic experiences when you're representing in terms of, let's just say, a theorem of mathematics, but don't make it completely symbolic, which is because you're not giving an experience. Ensure iconic or else a direct or a purposeful engagement. Otherwise, there is no point of bringing in the TLM into the classroom. Yes.
Oh, wonderful, ma'am. Really amazing session. A very useful session. Pukuri, sir? Yeah. Is there any questions from your
Ma'am,
side?
one more question lastly from one of the participants here. So, how best the realistic experience is helped in language classrooms are concerned? Explain. So, this is what asked Rajshekar Kosuri from Krishna district, ma'am, that he asked to please explain something.
From my understanding of the question, I think realistic experiences gives them a lot of skills that they can use outside the classroom as well. For instance, to describe a situation or to give valid crucial points or repeat a certain instruction. So they're targeting on skills that can be used outside the classroom as well. So what kind of experiences? It's called a cross-cutting phenomena of the brain. The brain is like a two-in-one situation where it uses what it has learned in a particular area and in multiple areas. So you're doing a lot of training outside your subject as well. So in that way, realistic experiences are beneficial.
Oh, great, ma'am.
Yeah, nice, ma'am. Ismail, can I?
Yeah. Sir,
Ma'am, is there another question raised by another person? But what is the difference between TLM and ILM?
Instructional learning material. Now, a teaching learning material can be used both by the teacher and the learner. Like, for instance, the pizza activity, which was used by both the learner and the teacher. An instructional learning material is most often exclusively used by the person who's giving the instruction, that is the teacher. Like, for instance, if I'm using an educational laptop, I would not be giving it to all 50 of them. So I take charge of the presentation and show it on the board. Definitive ways of telling that this is how it is, but then usually instructional learning materials are exclusively used by the instruction giver.
oh, wonderful. Really great session we had today. Hope users make use of this session and they use these techniques in their classrooms. And those who missed this live session can also watch the same video at CERT AP official YouTube channel also. Really, on behalf of SCRT, we extend our great gratitude to you, ma'am. Thank you very much, and also to the viewers as well as the KRPs, those who came and asked many questions here on the comment session. Sir, Pokuri sir, yeah.
So, dear team who are watching this entire webinar, so here are certain instructions related to Abhyasa app. At the end, one of the videos will be played by us. The request is that, as addressed by Vitiselvi ma'am, the server of the Abhyasa app be troubled due to attack of nearly 1.5 lakh users. So that is why they are in the work of giving more space for us. So that is why 40% of our teachers are unable to log in into that. All these issues will be solved in 2 or 3 days. So after that, you all will be get logged in, and all this unable to see the assessment and unable to see the material all will be solved. So that is why we request you to be concentrate on these webinars, and as and when everything is solved, then you can enter into this Abhyasa app and you can answer this all these quizzes, and you can go through the material. So don't be anxiety. And what I found is that you are continuously making calls from the ground to my number. I'm unable to control all that. So if you have a severe problem, something like that, you can text me so that I can manage, that I can do. Even what we observed that from EMIC mail also, you are sending many emails that I have attended webinar, I have wrote the exam like that. Individual teachers need not to send mails. So concerned DUOs and MEOs, they will send a mail. So you just attend that. So I think you all understood the technology glitches, and we certainly in the job of creating all the
Viewers, please stay tuned.